Our goal is to be able to learn in Microsoft Azure and use MSDN Azure credits or other Azure credits in a way that we can learn. And typically what will happen in some cases is you'll have a corporate account and you'll end up with an MSDN subscription. And when you go to set up your Azure credits, you'll find that there actually are two kinds of accounts and you can have them two with the same name. So if I went to work for BigCorp, I might have a BigCorp Active Directory account, and that would be used on the corporate network. And then I would have, when I activate my credits, they would actually get bound to joe@bigcorp.com, but it would actually be a private account. It would be a personal account and not a corporately bound account, because Microsoft actually lets you have multiple accounts with the same domain name, one tied to Active Directory and one, corporate Active Directory and one not. And it's cool, actually. They're actually in different domains. So when you log into the personal account, not the corporate account, you actually don't have access to any corporate resources. There is a little bit of a caveat, though, that it turns out because it's based on the domain name, your company can actually restrict you either on purpose or accidentally from being able to use that personal corporate account outside the company network, right? And it kind of makes sense. They're just like, hey, anything in this domain has to be logged into our domain. But these accounts are learning accounts, and so the question is, if it can be allowed, and we can do it without a security risk, is there a way we can get access to the Azure credits when we're on vacation and do some learning, right? And so I'm going to show you how that works, how you could possibly do that, and if nothing else, it's an interesting exercise in the difference between an external AD account, corporate account, Joe at BigCorp, or a Microsoft ID account with the same name. So we're going to scroll down through here and pick up one of the pictures. And so this is how it works. I've actually seen this two ways. Normally what will happen is the MSDN subscription credits will get bound. You'll become, your Microsoft ID will become the account admin for that subscription, while all your real corporate work is on the external AD, Joe at BigCorp here, because it's tied to the corporation's Active Directory with all the BigCorp subscriptions. And so in this case, I actually have two different user IDs bound to two different subscriptions. And I'm at the account admin on one and I'm a peon on the other. But because of the domain enforcement, both of those are still inside the corporate boundary, right? Even though one of those actually isn't a corporate account, but they're protecting the domain. In this case, I'd like to be able to use those credits to do some experimentation, assuming it doesn't violate any policies, which it shouldn't. And what I'll do here is typically what we do, you're going to do this anyway. You're going to, and so nothing here, everything here is exactly the way you normally use your learning subscription. You would basically create an Active Directory tenant. You stay the account admin of that MSDN subscription. The subscription, learning subscription automatically gets bound. You bind it to the tenant that you got. And so you end up with your account as a user and owner of this new Active Directory domain, and you're also still the account admins for the subscription. The subscription is bound to the directory. So now, anytime you have access to your Microsoft ID version of this bigcorp.com account, you would be living in this completely isolated world, separate from the corporate environment, because it's not the same ID. So the simplest way to get access to this, to extend access to these learning subscriptions, so you can use it on vacation, is you can, you have two choices actually. Well, you're going to do one thing. You're going to add an external user. You're going to add a new user who's not in this domain, who's not in the BigCorp domain, and you're going to give that user access to the subscription, which is how you might share a learning subscription anyway while two people are trying to do a project together, right? So this is really no different than that. In this case, I have two choices. I can do a Microsoft ID that is bound to some other domain like joe@gmail.com. And so then actually both accounts, versions of Joe, would be Microsoft IDs there. The other one is I can just create an internal user inside the new Active Directory here. I have Magic, and the directory name is Magic, and the domain we picked was me.onmicrosoft.com. And so in this case, I got two choices here. If I were to do the external Microsoft ID, I basically do an invite as a guest that they click on the email link and it comes back. And now whenever that Microsoft ID logs in the tenant list, one of them would be this magic me on Microsoft.com. The other option is to, like I said, is to create a new account that just exists in this domain. You log into Microsoft and you log in as Joe at me.onmicrosoft.com. It'll actually route that to the directory service, and that just works, right? So those are your two options. Some people might consider the on Microsoft.com less of a risk because it's not an ID that's used for anything else. I don't know. Probably the Gmail one is actually protected more because it's got MFA. Actually, they'll both, yeah, it'll do MFA and all that kind of stuff. So it's really up to you which way you want to go. The point here is what we end up with is we end up with two completely isolated AD directories, which means two isolated security infrastructure and two isolated sets of resources, one for the company and one for your learning experience. And you can make that, and it's probably a good idea to practice with Active Directory anyway in the learning subscription. So this is a good exercise. I think that's the best reason around this. You can play with these IDs. And one of the last thing is, like this Microsoft ID, whenever you invite an external ID to become a member of this, it comes in as a guest, which means it has fewer permissions. You can always promote that guest ID to be a member ID, and then it would have the same access, not necessarily the same permissions, but the same ability to get permissions that any of the on Microsoft.com, me.onmicrosoft.com, or that the owner would have on this. If I had used my personal account, it has 3 tenants already that it's tied to, and it could get tied to this new tenant that was a learning tenant and a learning subscription if I were to choose to. And that's so, again, some people might just do a temporary ID or a transient ID on the me.onmicrosoft.com here and not join all this together, but there's a couple different ways you can do that. And not only that, you can do it in your company too. So this isn't just a learning thing, but the idea here is to get some experience around Azure and how you can control access and do all that bridging stuff. I hope that was useful, and leave feedback if, oh, this is the one I want. Leave feedback if you have ideas about this. Have a great day.